Okay. So, pretty happy with my new shirt today. This is a color that I'm very fond of. I bought this shirt. This is one of 3 shirts that I bought last week at the Minnesota State Fair, which is still going on, but I've already decided that I can't spare the time to go back to it, so it's my one visit where this is like my main opportunity to buy shirts every year, and this time I only got 3, so I'm going to probably regret that later. But anyway, so today, when I was riding home on the bus, I was annoyed by a guy who was talking as though he were friends to a bunch of people, like, as they got on the bus. He didn't do me, but I was sitting there being annoyed by him doing it to other people in my presence and feeling as though I should have had some sort of duty to speak up against his inappropriate behavior, but as usual I did nothing. And I can never be sure when I suppress this impulse on my, like obviously it's probably better if I don't get myself involved in trouble, if only to avoid legal and violent possibilities. But I always have this feeling, and I suspect this is something I inherited from my mother, because she used to talk about this kind of attitude a lot, which I had a lot of issues with. She had a very definite temper problem, which probably runs in the family and has trickled down to me. But so I look at a situation and I'm like, wrong is being done here, and I feel as though even if I'm not involved, I feel as though I should have had a moral duty to get involved, and it feels like a failing on my part when I don't do that. And the reason that I have this incredibly strong negative reaction is to my way of thinking, with the way that I was raised. So I was born in 1980, so I'm a child of the 80s. I was a child all the way through the 80s, and then a teenager for most of the 90s. So based on how child rearing was being done in the 80s, and probably a lot of this is leftover attitude from the 70s, because my father in particular, and kind of both my parents, were sort of old-fashioned. I walk that back. My mother wasn't particularly old-fashioned, but she was out of the picture when I was 1. So my father and the various stepmothers that he recruited to come along afterward, one of which eventually stuck for about 10 years. So I was raised at that time based on what was probably about a 1975 or so attitude, that one of the most important things at that time was, like, the first thing that you teach a kid, lesson number 1 about how to operate in the world once you're even vaguely capable of making your own decisions, is never talk to strangers. Like, that was the most ingrained thing that you would basically say to a child as soon as they were verbal. It was to teach them to fear the world and to fear the potential. Now, it wasn't as crazy as it has gotten since then, because, these days you got your helicopter parents that can't stand to see a kid out of their sight. That was very much not the case back in, 50s, 60s. It was a radical swing away from what used to be to what is now. But I was somewhere in the middle of there, and the attitude I had was that you can't protect the kid all the time, so you got to teach the kid to protect themselves, and so that means there needs to be a certain measure of paranoia instilled, and beyond paranoia, there's just etiquette of don't talk to other people who you have not been introduced to, who are not part of your circle of associates. Leave them alone. They should leave you. You should leave them alone. They should leave you alone. And don't cross the streams, as Ghostbusters put it. Just let everybody operate in their own little personal space bubble, minding their own business, keeping their head down, And if you want to make a friend, you don't just pick a random person who happens to be nearby at a randomly selected point in time. You need to go to like social events where there are specific social rules or contracts or just general etiquette in play, which allow you to be like, "Hi, I'm so and so, and I'm interested in such and such." You don't do that just randomly as you're passing someone in the hallway of a building that you both went into for business reasons. You don't do it on the bus. You don't do it at the bus stop. This is partially just a pet peeve of mine. I admit I'm weird. I'm introverted and paranoid and all sorts of things like that. But it also seems to me as though it's a breakdown of social order and social cohesion that we used to have. Like they went too far in the Victorian age, but in some cases I think that we have progressed much further than we should have away from that, and that we should go like 60-80% of the way back to the Victorian model of like requesting someone's attention by dropping off a calling card or something. Maybe not to that extreme, but it just seems like the current attitude of just random people walking up to you on the street and going, "Hey man, what's up?" and acting as though they know you already, that pisses me off, and I think I've talked about that before. But so the don't talk to strangers thing was an aphorism when I was growing up. And another one that I'm not going to diverge very much into, but I just want to mention it here really quick, is I was always told the somewhat childish rhyme or whatever. It's not a rhyme, but the proverb as a kid that I grew up was hearing, "Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me." And I've always kind of taken that to heart, and it's a very unpopular attitude in the modern age. So neither of those aphorisms is what I wanted to talk about. Unfortunately, I can't remember the thing that was. As usual, an idea occurs to me, like I can pinpoint where I was in the space-time continuum at the moment that the script for this video started writing itself in my head, and unfortunately it kind of started at the end and worked backwards and decohesed over time, starting with the oldest part. So there was something, there was a specific philosophical point that I wanted to make on the basis of what was a very basic, fundamental piece of common wisdom that you would even teach to like a 5-year-old or an 8-year-old or whatever. Like, very basic stuff that I thought of as inarguable doctrine of how American society functions, and you know, if we deviate from this, it'll be cats and dogs living together insanity instantly overnight. And the world that we live in is pretty insane. So I can't help but feel sometimes as though we should have stuck closer to the things that I grew up believing in. But so a specific rule, something about everybody kind of minding their own business, or something to that effect. I can't remember. I've been stalling to see if it would pop back into my head, and it has not. So this is going to have to be an introductory preamble, and I'm going to have to like actively research this topic and see if I can recapture what it was that I was going to say, and possibly, you know, possibly within the next hour, possibly later tonight, possibly this weekend, or possibly not at all, I will attempt to follow up on this near epiphany of mine, this near miss with a good video topic. So hopefully this is not the last that you hear from me.